Okay, again, thank you for the invitation. We again are going to talk about quality, but instead of in the business cycle context, we are looking from the cross-country macro development context. Papers about quality, but also a difference with the previous paper, that this paper is mainly about measurement. We are not going to build a theory of quality. Quality is going to be taken as exogenous, and then we are going to try to assess the power of quality to explain the path of export diversification. Well, this is joint work with Chris Papageorgiou and Nicola Spatafora. All right, so stylized facts. The stylized facts that we use to motivate the work. The first one is this one. This is already a quite robust stylized fact that was produced by Ibs and Worthiak in a paper in 2003. What these authors find is that if we compare an index of diversification, could be the Herfindahl or the tail index, diversification in the domestic economy, diversification in terms of exports, diversification in terms of where workers work. What we find is that this index, this is really an index of concentration, right? If we go down, this means that concentration falls, which means that diversification increases. So what they find is that as economies develop, this is a panel of countries. There are so many dots because it's a panel. So we have like 100 countries with 20 observations for each of them across time. So what they find, this is the line that better fits the cloud, tells me that at the beginning countries diversify, and then after some point, which corresponds to more or less middle income, they start reconcentrating, right? So we have a pattern in which countries first diversify and later, as they become richer, they concentrate. This is quite robust. I can do it in many different ways and still get the same. For example, you can think, okay, piece of cake, this is just a consequence of a standard structural transformation, right? You concentrate on agriculture, and then you start playing with manufacturing, and then services, and then you accumulate a lot of your production in services. So fine, first of all, you diversify, and later you concentrate. Well, it doesn't matter how you do it. You do this for agriculture only, you do this for manufacturing only, or you do this for services only, and you get exactly the same. Within agriculture, you observe that countries first diversify and then reconcentrate. Within manufacturing, same thing. Within services, same thing. So it's a quite robust pattern.
It's probably not robust taking away 2 or 3 richest countries.
Well, in terms of most of the countries are less income and middle income, and it's true that the ones that drive mainly the reconcentration are advanced. So you get rid of the advanced. Is less clear, although you...
The decreasing is probably
yeah, but if you look at countries that are emerging economies like China, you get the hump, or countries where had a very rapid growth like Japan, still you get if you go back to the 50s, you get the hump. Yeah, this is true in the cross-section, but it's also true in the time series. So it's a quite robust pattern.
When they reconcentrate, do they reconcentrate in the same thing they concentrated before, or is it something?
I don't know. That's the issue.
Agriculture would be
Explaining why countries diversify is probably easier. The hardest part is explaining why they reconcentrate. In which products and how? How do you reconcentrate, right? So that's the most difficult part to explain, reconcentration. Why do countries reconcentrate? Okay, another fact that you observe, this is also a panel of countries, and this is the evolution, this is quality, a quality index. A quality index, and what this is relative quality. the quality indices to which you have access measure all the time relative quality. It's not absolute quality. It's your position compared to the quality frontier. Is the quality of Vietnamese products relative to, let's say, German products, right? It's always relative. That's why the top is always 1 for all products, for all product lines. So what you observe is that as economies develop, the quality of the products get closer to the quality frontier. All right, so looking at these 2 facts, what we try to do is asking the question, up to which point can quality explain the evolution of export diversification? So what is the contribution of changes in quality to the evolution of the export diversification process? Okay. Now, even though we don't build really a theory of quality changes, we still use a model to guide the measurement exercise. So we are modifying the Eaton and Curtin international trade model to incorporate quality, make sure that the prediction of the Eaton and Curtin model don't vary much when we introduce quality, and then from there we are going to match the model to the concentration indices that we use. And then we will generate predictions and compare the predictions to the data. Okay, which countries do we choose? We are going to focus on countries for which exports had really make a big difference. We choose 12 Asian nations. For all of them, export has been very, very important. All right, so let's start with the model. Okay, yep.
Just very briefly, does it matter if we think about an absolute index of quality or relative index of quality?
Well, it would matter. The problem is that absolute indices don't exist. We love that they exist.
So we're going to talk about, when you think about countries upgrading quality, that they upgrade the quality of their goods relative to other countries.
Right, to the quality frontier. There are no quality index. There is no absolute quality index. We would like to have one, but there isn't. Everything is relative.
Do you have, so you said exporters
right.
positions, but do the quality depend upon destinations? So for example, like Vietnamese export to Germany is not the same as Vietnamese exporting to
probably. We have not looked at that, but yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure, it will say, for example, there are papers that argue that the further away is the country to which you export, the higher is the quality. Yeah, so it depends. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends. We are completely silent about these issues in the paper. Yeah, but it does. The quality changes.
Can you go back to that quality graph? I'm just trying to understand the fact. So is the claim here that, so suppose Vietnam exports, say, coffee, I don't know.
Right.
Is it exporting higher quality coffee as it becomes richer?
Yeah.
Or is it going from coffee to a product where its quality, is that?
Okay, that's a big issue, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the borderline between a higher quality version of the same product and a different product. Yeah, that's a big issue in measurement. Still, we are just taking quality indices constructed by other authors. But yeah, that's a big issue, right? Is higher quality a different product, or is just the same product with a higher content of something that consumers appreciate?
I agree, but I'm saying sometimes it might be more stark than that. It might be that the $20,000 country is exporting vastly different products than the other one.
Okay, yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue. All right. Why quality can have a chance to explain the evolution of diversification?
Yeah.
All right. If we look at how diversification indices are constructed, they are a mix of two things, right? You can diversify because you can do the diversification exercise looking at domestic production, or you can concentrate on exports. We will concentrate on exports because the quality indices are more available, right? So one way you can diversify is by exporting more product lines, more different products. If you increase the number of products that you diversify, that you export, you are diversifying. This is the extensive margin, right? But there is another dimension through which you can diversify. If the value of two different products that you export becomes more equalized, then the diversification index will tell you that your exports are more diversified, right? But the value of your exports have a quality component, right? The value of the export of a single product line is the result of multiplying the unit value times the quantity. And in the unit value, there is a quality margin, right? That's what we saw in the previous paper. Huh? And that's why changes in quality may have a chance to explain the evolution of export diversification through the intensive margin. All right. Okay, the model. This is a Eaton-Curtin model in which we have many different sectors. There are papers that have introduced different sectors in the Eaton-Curtin model. What we do mainly is to introduce quality. All right, so we have an economy. Pretty much everything is standard. There are inhabitants in a country N. We are going to have different countries. These inhabitants of a labor get a salary. Then there are a number of sectors that go from 1 to capital K. And each of these products have a quality content. The quality content is denoted by K and KJ. This means the quality of product J that belongs to sector K in country N. All right. Now, quality delivers utility to consumers through a function that we call HK. And then the price of this product that has a quality content K is P. This is the price of product J that belongs to sector K and is produced by and is consumed in country N. Okay. The preferences are pretty standard. It's a CS utility function that weight different type of goods, consumption of different goods, and each consumption good has a quality content. This is the good thing of quality, right? Quality is going to bring into the economy a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that higher quality means higher utility. And now the bad thing that we also had in the previous paper, right? The bad thing is that to produce higher quality, you need more units of labor. So this is production, the amount of production of product J that belongs to sector K in country N, and it depends on a productivity parameter, Z, depends on the amount of labor, but the amount of labor that you use, besides being affected by efficiency, is also affected by quality. How? Through function A. Right? So this is the bad thing of quality. To produce quality, you need more resources. This is also telling you in the background the idea that we have of why quality may affect diversification. Imagine that you have a limited amount of resources in your economy. If you want to produce higher quality, in general, what you can do is to concentrate resources in less products, because quality is resource demanding. So through this mechanism, even though it's not really explored in the paper, is how we think that quality may matter to the reconcentration process. The limited resources that you have, you allocate it to less and less resources. Why? Because quality needs more labor or more human capital, more inputs. All right. In terms of that quality needs additional resources, we follow papers like Kruller and Van Hoogen or Baldwin and Harrigan. It's quite a standard. Okay, so as I said, quality has two effects. It gives utility, but at the same time it's more costly. what you find out, and this is one of the main equations, is that what matters in terms of exports is no longer just the price per unit of product, but is the price per unit of quality, right? When you introduce quality, you a little bit move the discussion from prices to prices per unit of quality. So you are able to produce at the price per unit of quality that is lower, you will export. Otherwise, you will not. The price per unit of quality depends on the price of the input bundle that we use in production. In our case, it's simple. It's just labor, so it's just the salary. And it depends on the efficiency, right? And also, it depends on quality. And this ratio has the positive side, more quality, and the negative side, more resources. In order for the higher quality product to be the one that is bought by consumers, we need to assume that the good effect dominates, right? Otherwise, it will never be demanded. So that's an assumption that we make. We are going to assume that the positive effect, the utility effect, dominates the cost effect. And then the highest quality will always be exported. But in terms of price per unit of quality. Okay. Fine. All right. So far we have talked mainly about quality. Now the next step is embedding this into the Eaton and Curtin model with expanding it to many sectors. If you know the model is quite simple, right? That's the beauty of the Eaton and Curtin model. It gives you a straightforward prediction about the level of exports. For that, you use Frechet distribution. We are going to stick to the model. So trade is going to occur because of efficiency. There are going to be random draws from a Frechet distribution of this efficiency parameter, and this is what is going to generate comparative advantage. And some countries will export some goods, and some countries will export other goods. Quality will also matter, sure. But in terms of the random component, we keep the Eaton and Curtin one, efficiency. All right, so once you do that, then following Eaton and Curtin, we show in the paper that introducing quality doesn't change things much. It's just that the relevant variable is not the price, but the price per unit of quality, and all the results hold. This is the key expression that you obtain from the Eaton and Curtin model. The key expression gives you a value for exports. Exports of products that belong to sector K that go from origin country I to destination nation N. And these exports, this volume of exports from sector K, right? At the beginning of the model, you disaggregate. Each sector has many, many different products, but later on in the model, you aggregate. And all the predictions are in terms of sectors. They are not for individual products, but for products that belong to a certain sector. The value of exports from sector K, that belong to sector K, depend on the fraction of goods that belong to sector K that the country exports, times the level of consumption expenditure in the destination country, right? What about the fraction? This is also important. The fraction of products within a given sector depend on the relative values of everything that determines the price to quality ratio. Remember that the price to quality ratio depends on the price of the input bundle, in our case the salary. It depends on the efficiency level that is captured by one of the parameters of the Frechet distribution. It also depends on quality, and also depends on, this is specific to trade, is an iceberg cost, right? Sending goods from the origin to the destination country is costly. So that also matters. And this is relative. This is relative to other countries, right? So this is what is going to determine the fraction of goods that you are going to export within a sector. All right? Okay. Right. So this is basically the theory that we use. Again, we don't really build a theory of quality. We are just using a theory to guide the measurement exercise, which is the main focus of the paper. On the way, we need to expand the Eaton and Curtin model. That might be seen as a contribution to introduce quality and see that all the standard results of the model hold. All right, now the map between the prediction of the model. This is the main prediction. Exports depend on the fraction of goods that are exported in each sector times the expenditure, the consumption expenditure in the destination country. How do we match these predictions to the diversification index? This is next. Which diversification index? There are many from which you can choose. We choose the tail index. Why the tail index? Because it has a very nice property. A nice property, Cadot and co-authors show that, well, a statistician has shown that the tail index can be decomposed between in the between component and the within component. What Cadot and co-authors do is that actually there is a perfect mapping between the between component of the tail index and the extensive margin, the export extensive margin, and between the within component of the tail index and the intrinsic margin or the diversification index. That's what Cadot do. So I can write the tail index as the between component plus the within component. So as I said, this is like writing the tail index as the evolution of the extensive margin plus the evolution of the intensive margin. How do we map the model and the index? Doing some simple algebra, what you find is that we can write the between component as the log of the number of sectors, capital K, and the sum of the fractions of products exported within each sector. Now, we are not really going to calculate the evolution of the extensive margin of the between tail index. Why? Because this index has to do with product lines that go from exporting 0 to exporting something positive, right? What is the problem? That when you have 0 exports, you don't have a quality index because you cannot compute it. You cannot estimate it, right? Whenever there is a 0 observation on a given year of a given product, you don't have quality index. So it's impossible to look at the extensive margin because of data restrictions.
Just to be sure, the sectors is the world diversity of goods that you are considering.
Sorry?
The sectors, capital K,
yeah.
It's a world diversity of sectors across all countries in the world.
Yeah, it's all the sectors that produce output, right? You have a domestic economy. You produce in K different sectors, but you don't export all of them, right?
And what is
some of them you export, some of them you don't.
And what is the value of K you have in your data set? Just an idea.
The value of K? Okay, yeah, I will talk about that later. In terms of the measurement exercise, it depends on the classification that you use, right? If you go to 2 digits, 3 digits, 4 digits, 5 digits, it's going to be that, wherever the database gives you.
What does make a country richer in your
No, there is not. We don't have a dynamic part. It's purely static. So countries don't really become richer. There is no growth. It's just it's the standard Eaton and Cortel model in which you just the goal is to generate comparative advantage, right? That's the only goal of the model. You want to generate comparative advantage so that trade occurs. How do you do that? Making random draws for an average distribution. There is no growth. Countries don't become richer.
This is a model where comparative advantages are endogenously generated, and then in the
the random distribution generates the comparative advantage. So I don't know where to call this endogenous. Huh?
At least in the cross section,
right.
You could imagine those shocks.
In the cross section, for each country in each single product makes a draw of an efficiency parameter, and this determines the comparative advantage of nations within each good of each sector, right? And then because of the properties of the Frechet distribution, actually you are able to aggregate very easily into the fraction of products that you will export each year in a given sector, right? But that's the only goal. There is nothing else. There is no really changes in the income levels of country. It's purely static.
Not that it's static. It's some statement of a law of large numbers. You could imagine a country as being something that has gotten a bunch of really lucky draws on all products or on many products, and then it's going to be richer than another country. That's, I think, what it's trying to say.
Yeah, well, yeah, but but next year it could be the poorest, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the stochastic process.
Happy, Omar? Okay.
Maybe instead of asking what's the change you're going to put in the model that's going to drive the change in the data.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Instead of like dynamics in the model.
Okay. All right. Very easily. What are we going to do? We have estimates of quality and other variables. So we know the evolution of these variables a long time. What we will do is to generate counterfactuals. Okay, let's feed the expression that generate the prediction in the model with the values of quality. And let's see how the predictions on the tail index vary over time. That's the only thing that we are doing. Everything is exogenous. Everything is exogenous.
It's not that everything is exogenous. What they want is, you started off with two pictures, which are very nice and interesting. Are you going to end up with two pictures in your theory that look like the two pictures in the data?
Yeah, that would be the great thing.
That's what they want.
All right. Not quite, but anyway. All right. The intensive margin. Again, there is an easy mapping between the theory and the tail index. We can write it as the relative weight of each sector, the value of export of each sector in total exports, and also the fraction. The only thing that I want to say here is to identify the main driving forces of the within, the between index. In terms of the between index, the extensive margin, the main force is the relative values of the variables that affect your exports relative to other nations, right? This is what drives the extensive margin. Whereas the intensive margin is driven by two main things. One is the relative values of the variables of interest relative to other sectors, right? Now we are no longer comparing nations, we are mainly comparing sectors. But also, something else that we do is that the evolution of the quality frontier, this quality evolves more rapidly compared to, let's say, strawberries. Strawberries increase quality, but probably much more slowly than could be mobile phones. Then, depending on the elasticity of substitution between these products, we will have changes in the level of exports. So, just to summarize, what are going to be the determinants of the intensive margin that at the end of the day is the only one that we can try to explain. Well, the relative values of quality, wages, efficiency, the differences across sectors, and also the differences at the technology frontier. Differences across countries, differences at the technology frontier. Okay. All right. So we are done with the matching between model of the measure. The countries that, as I said, the countries in which we focus are a bunch of Asian countries like China, Hong Kong, Indonesia, India, Japan, Cambodia, South Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Forget about the extensive margin. We don't have data to address the evolution of the extensive margin. We focus mainly on the intensive margin. Which kind of data do we use for exports? You can look at the numbers that the origin country tells you in terms of how much they export, but you can go to the other side. You can go to the destination country and look at the imports from another country that I get. Mirror data, which is going to the destination country to see how much I export, is preferred always. So we use mirror data. The import at the destination country tell us. Now, which aggregation? Going back to your question. In principle, we use SITC, 2 digits. This means that we have about 70 sectors of activity. High aggregation, also what it does for us is that the evolution of the tail index depends much more on the intensive margin than the extensive margin, right? Since we cannot say anything about the extensive margin, we prefer to go to a level of aggregation that is driven mainly by the intensive margin. This means less disaggregation. So here you have an evolution over time. This is taking a bunch of countries and looking at diversification, how evolves over time. Actually, you see here, you have the evolution of the intensive margin, right? Is here at the top of the blue area, and then the evolution of the whole diversification index, that is the top of the yellow area. You see that the intensive margin pretty much explains the variations. Everything is about the intensive margin. Why? Because of the level of aggregation. When you aggregate at 2 digits, it means that there are few zeros, right? You export pretty much in all sectors. Many, yeah?
These are all these 12 Asian economies, or which countries are behind this?
I don't remember now, but it's an average across countries, right? It's not a single country. It's a sample. It's a sample of country. I don't have it in the top of my mind.
Is it more like a time trend, which come to our country?
Yeah, this is just this is the tail index for an average of countries. So you compute, you have, let's say, 30 countries. You have the tail index for each of them. In each year, you compute the average, right? And this is what you evolve. As I told you, the relationship is quite robust, doing it in many ways. If you look at it across time, you get it. Why? Because countries become richer and richer as time goes by. So you plot here time, you get it. It's also a hump in the cross section, looking at average across countries. All right. What else? Let's go back a little bit. Here, authors' papers in general, what they use to take the model to the Eaton and Curtin model to the data is focus on this expression. This is a prediction about exports. But to use this expression, you need information on production, imports and exports, right? Because you need to know consumption expenditure. So you need to know production, you need to know, and on the top of that, import and export to get consumption. We don't have this information available. We don't have production information available going back to 1970 for all the countries in our sample. So we cannot follow what other papers do. So how do we resolve this issue? The fact that we cannot directly use this expression. Well, we are going to use a country and compute exports relative to this country. Which country? What? If we go to something else that we found when we tried to match the theory with measurement, we found that actually the quality frontier matters. Huh? So what is going on at the quality frontier is important to explain the evolution of the extensive margin, of the intensive margin, the evolution of the relative exports of a given sector. So what we do is to compute exports of these 12 Asian nations relative to a country that is most of the time at the quality frontier. Cannot be Japan, because it's in our sample. So what we decided is to choose Germany. Germany is a country that if you look at the quality indices across sectors, it's probably the country that is most of the time very, very close at the quality frontier. So this is going to be our reference country. This country also, according to this expression, is also capturing somehow the effects of the evolution of the technology frontier. This is also important. Why? Because we don't know how the quality frontier evolves. I told you that we only have data about relative quality. I know what is the quality of Vietnam compared to the quality frontier. But in absolute terms, I don't know where the quality frontier. I cannot compare quality of strawberries and quality of cell phones. I don't have data to do that. But I can tell you cell phones produced in China, in terms of quality, how they compare to cell phones produced in Japan. So it's relative. Okay. All right. Next. So we use this. It's very easy to generate this expression to generate predictions. This gives me the exports related to sector K that go from origin country I to destination country N. This is relative to exports from other country E. E is going to be Germany. Okay? And N, we are not going to use bilateral trade patterns. We are going to focus on exports to the rest of the world. So this is going to be exports from country I to the rest of the world relative to exports from Germany to the rest of the world. Everything refer to sector K. And this is going to depend on relative efficiency, something that we don't measure directly, something in which we are working on, but so far we don't measure it directly. Iceberg costs, trading costs, since you send your products to the rest of the world, are going to be very similar across economies, right? It's not like bilateral trade. That then is clear that it depends on whether you send products. If your products go from Vietnam to China, it's not like products that go from Spain to China, right? The costs are going to be very different. But if it's the rest of the world, they will probably not vary too much. It will be similar. It's the rest of the world. So relative transportation cost, relative wages, relative quality. We don't have much guidance in terms of which values to give to the parameters. The literature doesn't offer values for those parameters. So what we do is, as a first approximation, is to construct a regression that would be very similar to a gravity equation, in which in terms of distance, we introduce tariffs. So R would be tariffs to control for trading costs. Then we have wages. Wages, which wages do we have? We don't have, again, we are working on it, but so far we don't have wages per sector. We have simply the aggregate wage in the economy computed at the marginal product of labor. And then we have a quality index. The quality index that we use is the one computed by my co-authors, Papa Giorgio and Spatafora, for many, many different countries. How much? 5 minutes? Okay, probably is enough. for many, many different countries, time span that goes from 1970. There are other indices of quality. Probably the technology frontier right now is Finstra Romalis. The good thing about these authors is that they use information from the demand and the supply side of markets to construct this quality index, so they get around better around identification issues. The methodology that Papa, Georgia, and Spatafora use to estimate the quality index only use demand side information. So it's a bit worse than Finstra and Romalis, but in terms of the countries in which we focus and the time span, Finstra and Romalis doesn't offer enough information. So we go with Papa, Georgia, and Spatafora. All right. So to estimate our parameters, we use a bunch of dummies, sector dummies, country dummies, time trends, and then we estimate the parameters. What do we do next? We predict exports. To predict exports, this prediction is relative to exports from Germany. And this is the estimation. This is the estimation. The estimation is carried out only for a time span that goes from, we are going to make prediction from 1970 to 2010, but actually the estimation period in terms of the parameters is much more reduced than that. It goes from 1990 to 2010. And also when we generate the predictions, some of the variables that are included in the regression are excluded, right? So the prediction exercise seems reasonable. Huh? Okay. So we are going to generate counterfactuals, keeping constant some of the variables, and starting moving just quality. So if wages, German exports remain constant at the initial value, 1970, what is the power of quality to explain the evolution of quality, as the evolution of the diversification index? Then, when we answer that question, we let quality and wages move, keeping German exports constant, and finally we generate another counterfactual in which we let German exports, quality, and wages move, right? Again, in this prediction, we don't use many of the variables that we have used to get estimates of the parameters of the model. Okay, let me just go to the, all right, that's a summary of the results. All right, so for example, one of the results that we had, Japan, the fit with the lines is obviously not good. Why? Because we exclude a bunch of variables that contribute to explaining the evolution. We don't have all these dummies that have to do with efficiency, around 90 variables, right? So we cannot expect that we are matching lines. That's not the exercise, what the exercise is about. Huh? So what do we, if we use only quality, the evolution of wages, and the evolution of German exports, these worldwide forces that shape the quality frontier, what do we get? What we get, what this picture is telling you, this would be the tail concentration index over time. What we have is that the model is the black line, the red lines are the data. What we obtain is that most of the time, I'm not going to show you the 12 countries. Here, for example, I only show you Japan. The model predicts too much concentration, concentration. Sorry, diversity, no, concentration. Yeah, too much concentration, right, this is concentration. The model predicts too much concentration. So it means that variation in efficiency is also responsible to the evolution of higher diversification, right? Yeah, I'm going to be done very fast. So that's one of the predictions. Then we go to the counterfactual. Let me give you the main one. All right. So another thing, for countries that the diversification index tells you that they have been concentrating more and more and more, the model tends to do better. So what we find is that quality is mainly contributed towards reconcentration. That was our prior. So quality helps mainly to get a more concentrated, yeah, I'm going to be done in 1 minute. It helps country to become more concentrated. This is the example of China. The predictions of quality are this dashed line, and they always look for higher concentration, right? So in countries where, well, we rescale the predictions. This is not about explaining the absolute value of the evolution of the index. It's about finding what is the power of changes in the quality index to explain changes in the diversification index. Well, let me go. A country for which the model also does relatively well is Cambodia. So China and Cambodia are the most important successes of the model, right? For Cambodia, actually, the evolution of quality in Cambodia actually is able to predict increasing diversification and then reconcentration. Then the last exercise that we do, now a big issue is how do we measure, the fit of the model, right? That's a big issue. We are open to suggestions. But so far, what we use is the pseudo R-square. But again, I'm not interested in exactly matching the line. I'm not interested in matching absolute values. What I'm interested is in knowing how changes in quality explain changes in the diversification index. So in this other exercise, what we do is to divide the sample in different decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, rescale the predictions so that they match the initial year in this decade in the data, and then compute the R-square. It's a pseudo R-square. This means that can be negative. It's bounded about by 1. So if on average the direction of the prediction actually goes in the same direction of the change in the data, then the R-square will be positive. But for example, here is negative. Well, this is positive. This is a typo. But here is negative. Why is it negative? Because compared to the initial point, the data went in one direction, but the predictions using only quality went in a different direction, so it's negative. Why is here positive?
Can you just look at the correlation of increases?
Could look at correlation, but that's an issue of how to measure this is one of the main issue of the exercise, right? I could look at correlation, but correlation only tells you an idea about the linear relationship. So actually they can be changes may not match very well, but
the statistic you do will be incomplete, but the correlation of the increase is something we can understand, and it's immune to rescaling.
Okay, yeah, it's an option. The only thing is that the correlation only look at linear relationships, right? So, but yeah, it's an alternative, sure. Okay, so fine. That's what we do to look at the match rescaling using pseudo R-squares. Well, what we find is that for some countries, quality matters. For some other countries, quality doesn't. The main examples for which it matters are China and Cambodia. That can explain, for example, for Cambodia, for some decades, the explanation power goes to 77% of the variation compared to the initial point. All right. Done.
Okay, so I suggest to continue discussion over the coffee. Let's have just a 10-minute break. Okay. Thank you, Fidel.
Thank you.